Tony joins us now, and first of all, I guess in your neck of the woods, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. We just busted into noon. How are you, Robert? Good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear your voice too, and I wanted to start with this. I don't know how many comments you get on this, and Bob Huggins is not just a well-known Hall of Fame coaching figure in basketball, but I think he's an imposing, even intimidating figure. A lot of fans, Bob Huggins, he's kind of a bad mama jamma type. But I had the opportunity now with the Sirius. I love the Big 12 channel on Sirius, and I've been a long time Sirius subscriber, so I listen to that quite often when I'm driving from Edmond to Stillwater. The treat is listening to the Bob Huggins radio coaching show. You guys should take that act and go on the road because in a day and time when people say coaching shows are boring, both radio and television wise, you guys are anything but boring. That's a pretty good act, comedic material that you guys are able to come up with. It's funny.
You know what, Robert? I say this oftentimes about that show. It's so bad that it's good. In some ways, some ways it's Seinfeld-esque. The thing
Yes.
has taken on a cult following. You know, Hugs just finished up his 13th season, and we routinely, pack the place shoulder to shoulder, and they literally have a downstairs area where they put television so people can go in there and watch it as well. And here's the deal. His preface is this. Number one, he enjoys doing it. He really, truly does. So he's one of these guys that'll show up if they're not practicing it depending on the semester. If they're not practicing right up to the start of the show, he's in there early and he stays late. And he enjoys doing it. He enjoys mingling with the fans. And his other rule is, hey, let's not talk much about basketball. So as you know, we talk anything, everything, and have a lot of fun with it. So, yeah, it's so bad that it's good.
Yeah, and all three of you guys are pretty comfortable with each other. Although I got it, there's sometimes that I'm listening, so I'm not watching. That I'm trying to picture the look on your face sometimes when things are said, and I'm thinking I'd love to see what Tony looks like right here.
I'll say this, Robert. We run with a delay, and we use the delay. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
It's probably the most used delay at Learfield IMG that they have.
Well, you were in Kansas City, and I know the sideline guys are always jealous because especially when you guys go to Kansas City for the tournament, you guys have the dinner with the play-by-play voices, and I talked to Wyatt quite a bit at K State. Of course, Dave's my teammate here, and
Sure.
they talk about how much fun that is, and so forth. But I got to think this was the one of the strangest conference tournaments you'd ever been to that you never called a game at.
It really was bizarre for everyone. I think broadcasters, fans, players, obviously coaches. It was like something that never, we had never seen before. And it was, it kind of built up. We went into it. Robert, the first thing when we were flying there, just getting ready to take off to go to Kansas City, we got an email that said, hey, when you get there, interviews are going to be specifically in a media room. You're not going to be able to go into the locker rooms or roam around the hallways as you normally do. So, okay, that was like a first little piece. And then when you get there, a few more restrictions are put in there. And then, it all just really started to quickly trickle. And then we got to the point where, well, you're going to play, but you're not going to have fans. You're going to have 120 fans or whatever it was for each school. And when I went to bed the night before West Virginia was supposed to play Thursday, I saw the NBA deal happen, and I said,
Yeah.
we're not playing. And obviously it all, unraveled from there.
Yeah, and it was crazy that I live in Edmond, which is about 50 minutes south of Stillwater. It's a north suburb of Oklahoma City. And when my wife actually follows the Thunder a lot more than I do. Her she's the office manager for a dentist, and they're the official dentist for the Thunder. So somebody on their staff's at every game, and and she had heard from her boss and that what was going on with Rudy Gobert and the game itself, which he was sitting there in that arena when they told everybody, "Hey, drive home safely. There's no game tonight," which that was
Yeah.
pretty weird. But yeah, it's funny that it was ground zero here, and I think most of the people thought in Kansas City like you did. Once that happened, that if the NBA is not playing, they're not going to play college basketball. But it took college basketball a while to figure it out. Where were you when all the meetings were going on Thursday morning?
I was right in the area there. I was, kind of hanging around and had contact with West Virginia's athletic director, Shane Lyons, as they started to kick it around. And as you remember, Big East had started. ACC
Yeah.
was warming up, and it was the trickle down effect. And the Big East was starting to get some grief that they hadn't shut it down yet, and that's when it all happened.
Tony Caridi with us, the voice of the West Virginia Mountaineers. And what is, I feel sorry sometimes for West Virginia in that.
Why is that?
No, I think you know where I'm going. I always talk about. I'm with Hugs. The conference has got to do everything they can and bend over backwards to give them a palatable road trips, and like maybe you play Saturday one way, one site at Kansas, and maybe you play a Monday game at Kansas State or vice versa, and just make things as best they can. Because I know this, I only travel with football. That is the most extreme trip we make. There's no doubt about it. And you feel different when you come home from playing a road game the weekend at West Virginia. Dave and John tell me the same thing with basketball. It's just different when you travel that far, and it doesn't feel like a conference game. It feels more like a one of those longer trips you might make in the non-conference. And I can only imagine. And then Dana's a friend of mine, and don't blame me for that, but uh, Dana was always telling us, man, it is tough when you're coaching at West Virginia and you're making the trips. You guys only do it once every 2 years. West Virginia does it three, 4 times, 5 times a year. So
Yeah.
that's what I was saying about that. But when you look at it, what's it like out there? Because I think where there's so much distance between us and Morgantown and the state of West Virginia, we may not have a good realization of what things are like right now for you guys.
Do you mean travel-wise, or do you mean just
No,
basically
no,
out here?
I mean with the COVID-19,
Oh,
what are
yeah.
things like out?
Well, like everyone, obviously everything is shut down, and
Right.
so that's the similarity. My perception, Robert, is that Neil Brown has done an absolutely fantastic job of taking the lemons and making lemonade. They seem to be way out and in front of this thing and aggressively attacking the opportunities that they have as the rules, have been brought in by the NCAA as far as what you're able to do. So they really went aggressively. First thing was mental health of players. That was what they spent their whole first week on, was making sure that coaches had eye-to-eye contact, over Zoom or whatever they were using, to make sure that the guys were good to go mentally as far as what their family situation was, how they were dealing with it. So that was number one. And they just, as you know, Neil, and probably know about Neil, I mean, he's the ultimate organization guy. And I had him on my show, and he said, in this situation, like all football people, right, you always try to find your competitive advantage. So he just kind of took a look at what the rules were and what you could or could not do. And he said, okay, how can we exploit this, and how can we make ourselves better as a result of this? So in that regard, and again, we won't know until games are actually played, but I think they've been really at the forefront of getting this thing done. And this was going to be a huge spring because it's Neil's second season, so he's starting to
Yeah.
get the trickle of guys that he brought in his first class, the development of the other guys. This was vitally important for them. But as he says, it's better that it happened to us year two, because if it had happened to us in year one, those year one coaches, it really would have been a massive setback. But they've done well with it. And in basketball, doing a lot of the same, trying to stay in touch with these guys. But, without your strength coaches and things like that, you really truly won't know as to how they've been able to do until you get them back here.
Yeah, and I understand where Neil's coming from. Dave Aranda at Baylor, I think that's a tough situation where he's jumping in there, and they've lost a lot. Not just Coach Rule going to the NFL, but they lost a lot of their players from a really good team this year. In fact, West Virginia kind of found their quarterback answer possibly right around the time Oklahoma State came up there and played them toward the end of the season, and that's the one thing that I think probably I would guess Neil would lament the most is getting extra work with a quarterback that you probably feel pretty good about.
Yeah, that was going to be Austin Kendall and Jarrett Deggy were going to be the two guys
Right.
that battled during the regular season. You're right, Deggy came on at the end. He ended up playing 4 games. He had transferred from Bowling Green, and they were not sure whether or not they were going to play him at all during the season. But when they went with him, he responded well. He had 7 touchdown passes in his 4 games, 7 TDs, did 3 picks, completed 66% of his passes. Led West Virginia to a season-ending victory at TCU. He went 2-2 as the starter. He won at Kansas State and then won at TCU. So it was going to be, it was the battle. I think you're right. Deggy was probably the leader going into it, and Kendall was going to have his chance to get the job back. And so you do miss out on that. Robert, they do a lot of things, as I said, with accountability. They have all kinds of different competitions that are still going on in regard to accountability and things like that, and they're constantly posting those on social media. And Deggy's team of guys, as far as accountability, he's been up there the whole way and talking to those guys. They feel that he's done the things off the field as far as what quarterbacks do to gain leadership on a team, and so they're happy with where he is right now.
Yeah, I was impressed with him, and that was kind of a weird game that we were involved in up there. It was tightly contested. It ended up being more of a defensive game more than it was maybe an offensive game. But I was impressed with Deggy, and I remember is that his older
Yep,
brother?
older
Yeah, his
brother
older
Seth
brother.
played at Tech for
Yeah,
Neil. Actually, Neil was the offensive
yeah,
coordinator when Seth Deggy played. You're right.
yeah. He dusted Oklahoma State a couple of times, I think, or at least once. I remember. Um, anyway, as far as the folks at the campus and the surrounding area, because you have some major, Pittsburgh's an hour away. That's a major metropolis. How are people? Kind of give us a postcard of how people are dealing with this.
I think overall, Robert, as a state, extremely well. West Virginia was the last state to have a positive COVID test, believe it or not. And so that's a good thing. I think a lot of that has to do with, just by numbers, demographics. We're socially distant in comparison to everyone because we just don't have big, huge bases of population. Morgantown is 60,000 plus when the students are here, but you take them out and you're at a 30,000, and that's kind of, like the big area, right? Huntington, West
Yeah,
Virginia, probably in that neighborhood, Charleston in that neighborhood, but we don't have that several 100,000 population bases that would lean more toward this thing being spread. So for the most part, we've been hovering at about 4% as far as infection rate goes based on testing. Going into today, we had 26 fatalities as a result. The governor came out yesterday and did close schools for the rest of the year and continue to do it online. West Virginia, I saw one national publication yesterday, had graded number one among the 50 states as far as handling it, got out in front of it. And so far, relatively speaking, things have gone probably as well as you could have hoped for.
yeah. I was going to say those numbers are uh, much better than here in Oklahoma. So, congratulations to the leadership there in the state of West Virginia. Like you said, they've done a terrific job. Now, as we kind of wrap it up here with Tony Caridi, um, Mike Gundy, and he was actually on with us, and I think he got criticized nationally pretty heavily for some of the things he said, but those people weren't on the hour-long teleconference. Most of it was pretty good, and he, like anybody else, you know, sports personality or government leader, he was applauding the first responders, the people in Stillwater on the front line at Stillwater Medical Center, and so forth. But you know, when you look at this, coaches want to coach, and people who get out there and say, well, hey, we got to have safety for the players. Well, obviously you have to have safety for the players, but if you're wondering if these players want to find a way to play, go ask them. I think you're around them enough to know they want to play, and announcers want to announce. Uh, so when you look at that from that perspective, um, what are you thinking about this season? And I know nobody has a crystal ball. No, none of us are going to be right. We can only kind of guess at what we're seeing. But what's your best guesstimate as to what we might head into this fall, whether there's a football season or not?
Well, I'll be the first guy to wave my hand around and say I'm out of my league when it comes to even talking about this. Here's where I'm leaning on this, Robert. I totally put all my chips in with people who live this world, and that is the medical folks and
Sure.
that deal with immunology and they know this world, right? So you see the report today coming out of the head of the CDC, who said that the second wave potentially could be worse this coming fall winter, and I lean into those people that know. With that being said, I did see that Brett McMurphy had a tweet out this morning that did a survey and said that 99% of athletic directors, I don't know if you saw this or not yet, 99% of athletic directors say that there will be college football this coming fall, or they will play college football this season. And then it broken down into percentages as to how many percent would be delayed, how many percent think that it will happen, after January of this coming year and still play. So I think it's some aspect that we do play. Exactly how that's going to look, I really don't know, because, Robert, as Commissioner Bowlesby said last week, we're not going to play until kids are back literally on campus and taking classes. So to me, this goes so far away from coaches and medical personnel as far as trainers go. This goes to presidents of universities and governors of states. They ultimately have to make the decision as to when it's safe to get back together again.
Yeah, there's a lot there's more moving parts to this than anything I've ever experienced in my lifetime, and I think that's probably the case for all of us. Hey Tony, I appreciate it. Best to you and all the guys you work with there with the West Virginia Mountaineer Network, and I know this. We really, Dave, John, and I, we really enjoy going to West Virginia. I had family. I never went and visited them, but we had family when I was a kid that lived in West Virginia, and I just always kind of uh, kind of thought, well, I wonder what that looks like. Well, now as an adult going up there, it is. I will say this: it is the most beautiful place that we go play. And I know a lot of people were fond of Colorado when they were in the league. I particularly wasn't, but I do love going and seeing the mountains there in West Virginia and the landscape. And man, what a beautiful place.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. And as you say, if you come in October when the leaves are in full bloom, it's absolutely gorgeous. And
Oh,
it's been amazing, man. It's been 8 years. West Virginia, can you believe it? It's been 8 years since West Virginia and TCU came into the conference, and it seems like it's gone by so fast. I don't know about you guys, but it's been wonderful for us. And I know, like we talk about, the travel.
travel's tough.
The big picture, but the big picture is this, man. We couldn't be happier than to be in the Big 12. And the travel deal, to be quite honest with you, is just a mental approach. If you make it like it's a hassle, then it becomes a hassle. If you just kind of go like, that's the reality. And quite honestly, Robert, West Virginia was in the Big East. I don't want to squeeze too much of your time here, but
No.
these teams that were in what was the Big East now, the UConns of the world and things like that, I mean, they're playing in Houston. I mean, they're traveling. So the world has changed as far as that goes because of that last conference reorganization. And to be honest, man, like we're in the air. The longest you're in the air is going to Lubbock. If the wind's blowing at you, you could potentially be like 3 hours and 45 minutes. But for the most part, we're 2:30, we're 2:45, we're 3 hours maybe, but it's mostly 2 to 3 hour stuff. So just like get on with it, right? So my opinion is this: you'd be sitting in your room for another 45 minutes or an hour. So in order to play in a league that has schools that are similar in mission, fan bases, as we are in the Big 12, I think it's been absolutely wonderful. If we ever, expand, maybe, have a couple of teams that are on the Eastern time side, maybe that would be good. But I love 10 schools. I love playing everybody in football. I love playing everyone twice in basketball. We love it. And we think it's perfect, and hopefully it'll go on as it is.
Man, I'm glad to hear that because Hug scares me sometimes when he gets frustrated and gets
Well,
out
here's the
there
deal. Here's the
thinking,
deal on
man,
Hugs.
he
Always
wants to
keep
get
this.
out of this league.
No, 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 no. Here's the deal, man. Keep this in mind when you hear Hugs. If he's not complaining, then something's wrong. Coaches are coaches. You know this as well. If they're not if
Yes.
they're not complaining about something, then something's wrong. They're by nature, all they want to do is make things better, complain. So that's just Hugs' nature. The reality of it is, this has been fantastic for WV. It really, truly has.
Yeah. Hey, Tony, I appreciate the time and be well, and hopefully we do get together this fall. I certainly hope so.
All right, buddy. You take care of yourself. Thank you.
All right, Tony Caridi, voice of the West Virginia Mountaineers.